What's good, people? This is Cypher, and you are watching Farside TV. And right now, we're about to go over the best rappers for each year of the last 20 years. So if you don't know me, I'm Cypher. I make and listen to music so you don't have to. And if you don't mind, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell for notifications so you can see more dope videos like this. I really consider it. I highly consider it. I think you're going to like what you see. So let's get into it, man. So we're going to go from 2005 to current day 2024. That's 20 years, right? So let's go ahead and do it. So 2005, we got Mr. Kanye West as the best rapper that year. Now, it was hard doing this list. It was hard because that year we had the I guess you can say the reprise of Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne dropped the Carter 2, and everybody was talking about, hearing little murmurs, that this guy may or may not be the best rapper ever. We don't know yet, but we're getting to that point, right? So Carter 2 is fresh. We had Hustler Music, Money on My Mind, etc., etc. But we also had T.I., we had Jeezy, and we had several other rappers, right? But this guy, Kanye West, stood out above the rest because not only did he have a tremendous year beforehand, 2004, but 2005 was looking to be even higher with late registration. So 2004 had his breakout year with College Dropout, which had Through the Wire and Slow Jams and several other records. Kanye's is the one that stood out more with the backing of Jay-Z and just his overall presence of a new entity in the rap game. So Kanye definitely took over with all his singles. Heard Him Say featuring Adam Levine. The list goes on and on. You already know the rest. 2006, we had T.I., T.I.P., the king of the game, Jay-Z the South. Nobody was higher than T.I. at that moment. T.I. had King, which boasted the #1 single that whole year, which you know about that. And T.I. also had ATL, the movie, which was our current day Friday at the time. So ATL was out with Ant and Big Boy and everybody in there. It was dope. Dope time. Great time. What a time to be alive. T.I. was on top. You couldn't touch him. Now T.I. did follow that year with a dope T.I. versus T.I.P. album in 2007, but although he was on the rise with that one, the only one that could top him at that time, album-wise, was Kanye West. Yes, so 2007 goes to Kanye West. Kanye West had his album Graduation, which went against 50 Cent's album Curtis, and to see who had the best album that year. Now, to be honest, Curtis was nowhere near T.I.'s album, but it was still in talks for being, one of the best albums or whatever. But we all know Kanye wouldn't have the better album. He had boasted his biggest single at that moment, probably to date, which is Stronger featuring Daft Punk, Good Life featuring T-Pain, Can't Tell Me Nothing. There's several songs from there. They were going song for song. So this album definitely presented itself to be the #1 album that year and one of the most downloaded albums that year as well. 2008 is another video that talks about that. My video about why 2008 was such a great year when everybody dropped. T.I., Lil Wayne, Kanye West, Jeezy, Ludacris, everybody you can think of dropped that year. All the hip hop heavyweights dropped that year, but one person stood above everybody else by a tiny margin, T.I., but by a large margin everybody else, and that was Lil Wayne with the Carter 3. Carter 3 had A Milli, had Lollipop, had all these great singles, and nothing else could really top it. So we're not really going over the best albums each year, but these albums contributed to why these artists had the best run of that year amongst everybody else. So Lil Wayne was on top of it. He was starting to be on more people's singles, on their features, on their remixes, and just the Carter 3 just smashed the whole summer and pretty much the year entirely. 2009 brought in a different era, and even though Drake was starting to slide in and align himself with Lil Wayne and Young Money, we also had somebody else that was on the cusp of taking that spot anyway, and finally had his magnus opus at that time, and that was Gucci Mane, 2009. At that time, nobody could touch Gucci Mane. He had his album Roderick Davis vs. The State. He had Lemonade. He had several mixtapes right before that, leading up to it, and he also collaborated with Lil Wayne to really solidify the fact that he was on top of the game with the greats. So Gucci Mane was the talk of the town, and even though Drake was on his way, he wasn't quite there yet. But his time would come the next year in 2010 when Drake would take over the world and come out with his first debut album, Thank Me Later, and amongst other singles and other features with other people, Young Money and just everybody else, Timbaland, Jay-Z, Kanye, and it just exploded from there. So Drake definitely took over 2010. Everybody was looking forward to it. He had singles for days, and not only did he have the summer, but he had the winter too. 2011 was crazy because we had our first back-to-back in a very long time. Now, Kanye had several years as being the guy, but he didn't have a back-to-back at this time yet. Even though 2004 was very close, that one's kind of up for debate, but luckily we missed that year. But 2011 definitely belonged to Drake. He ushered in his best album, arguably, Take Care, which boasted the track Marvin's Room, which changed the trajectory of all hip-hop at the time. Everybody wanted to make a Marvin's Room type record, and everybody wanted to make that slow, somber, drunk, slow rap singing, melodic, melancholy type beat, whatever. Everybody wanted to have a Marvin's Room type song. So Drake ushered in that era, of course, backed by Lil Wayne and Young Money in itself. 2011 belonged to Drake. 2012, that was the change of hip-hop again, because we had to slip into the trap era. The trap era is really when everybody rose up. All these trap guys came, all these singles, all these Roscoe Dashes, these Futures, 2 Chainz, everybody just came and they had the trap music. If you didn't have a trap record, then you really wasn't participating. So that's where we was going with it. It was even in commercials for Target, for kids. Trap music was the thing. So if you didn't have a trap single, you weren't one of the top guys. And at this time, this guy had been around, but he just really got his spark after being backed by Kanye, leaving Ludacris's label and pushing out himself as a solo artist, and that was 2 Chainz. So 2 Chainz had 2012 on lock. He had several features. He has the album Boats, and I mean, there's no one else that was really talked about as much as 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz was the guy. He was on everybody's record. He had big records and a big catalog to back it up. And now we go into 2013 when we go back again and grab Drake, because Drake had, again, arguably best album to date, Nothing Was the Same, which in his opinion is his favorite album. So you might just want to call it his best album. But Nothing Was the Same. And that time it was kind of tricky because, like I said, the year before, everybody was going to trap. So you had to either choose between all these trap artists or a solid Drake album that was the complete opposite of that. And which one won? Drake won. Of course he won. He was on top of the game anyway. All the trap music was just an alternative listening method to listen to until Drake finally dropped it, and he did, and that's where we got Nothing Was the Same. So that would introduce us to artists like Magic Jordan, Jhené Aiko, and etc., and also Sampha. So yeah, definitely 2013 definitely belonged to Drake. So now 2014, we get a different change because we're still headed toward the future, and not necessarily future, but trap future. And again, this time we got a blend of that and also a sense of something different, and that would be in the form of a Young Thug. Young Thug came around, and not only did he transform the game with his different type of aesthetic, but he made people that, even though they hated him or didn't like him, definitely gravitate toward his music style because they were curious of what he was thinking about and why he made that type of music. He also aligned himself with Birdman and Rich Homie Quan, formed Rich Gang, and would drop several projects with them together. And the catalog just kept building and building and building to where he was undeniable. The guy had singles after singles, and whether you liked him or didn't like him, he was in the conversation. So 2014 belonged to Young Thug. And then we finally get to 2015, we finally get to Future. Future had already been around for a few years, but now he finally has the game in the palm of his hands. Nobody can touch Future. Future is on the same level as Drake. And even though Drake almost took this year with that If You're Reading This Is Too Late project mixtape album situation, Future would take over that and drop DS2. Dirty Sprite 2 is the one that took everybody's attention and shot Future up from regular trap artist to megastar, up there with the Drakes and everyone else. So that's why we gotta give it to Future. And also a side footnote, 2014 could have belonged to J. Cole, but that's more so on the album side. The album of the year definitely belonged to J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hills Drive. But as far as trajectory and mission statements and everything that went on along with the artist itself as a whole, I gotta give that to Thug. So I just wanted to retrack and give that to y'all in case y'all thought I missed it. So yeah, 2015 belonged to Future. He took it, he ran with it, he dropped his own projects, own mixtapes, own album, worked himself with Drake, worked himself with Wayne, and he just took off from there. 2016 was different. 2016 was kind of a drought because music was starting to decline and the interest levels, and even though people were dropping stuff, it just wasn't the same. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't as good. Even though this could have technically went to I guess a future, but not really. I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. I would say that this would almost entirely go towards Travis Scott. Travis Scott took over that game. He was dropping music left and right. And even though he had been around and had been dropping albums and tapes, 2016 really belonged to Travis because he was really pushing his singles and his objectives out there, aligning himself more with DJ Mustard, more with Metro Boomin, more with Kanye, and just more with other artists in general. So Travis Scott was really getting his looks at that time, in a time where not too much was going on. 2017, definitely gotta give that to Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar had already dropped that Pimp a Butterfly a couple years before, 2015, but it wasn't really sticking with the masses as much as we would think or would like to, because it was more of a, not necessarily a political album, but more of a Black Power positive statement album. And ain't nobody trying to hear that in 2015. So that's why we got 2017 with Damn, which would be an epic story told backwards by Kendrick Lamar and have several features, have Zakari on there, have Rihanna on there, and several other people, and that's what made the album stand out so much, because it would be his last album until he dropped another album like 8 years later. No, okay, we're exaggerating just a little bit. More like 5-ish years later. So yes, Damn was great. Kendrick was on top of the world, and his singles were on top of the world, so you couldn't really deny him. And also it boasted his biggest single to date, which I believe is Humble, followed by DNA. 2018, again, Travis Scott, this time for real this time. So Travis Scott already been around. This time he got the big backing of Astroworld and the big backing of Drake. So he was kind of getting to that same future status as being aligned with and being as even on as Drake. So that's why we got Travis Scott in the picture and in the mix. And it worked out well because people bought Astroworld. It was the #1 album at the time. It beat Nicki Minaj's Queen album, which she was very upset about. But Travis Scott took over the world with that. Sicko Mode took over everything. It took over the NBA. It was a thing. So even though there was a lot of weak drops that year, it was also some great drops. I gotta give credit to honorable mention to Lil Wayne, because Lil Wayne wasn't the artist of the year by far means, but he did drop the Carter 5 finally, and it was a great album. And Drake did drop Scorpion, which was really poorly received for reasons. But Travis Scott, numbers-wise, took over 2018. So 2019 belongs to Rod Wave. Even though he is more so on the singing side, he is still technically a rapper. But whether you like his style or not, or his albums, or even listen to him, everybody was talking about Rod Wave. Rod Wave took over the whole internet community when it comes to beat production, because everybody wanted to make a Rod Wave type beat. It's probably one of the most popular type beats you'll find on YouTube, and he's literally everywhere in the talk of the town. It was a change in the new era of hip hop, and we're getting more crooning, so that's where Rod Wave comes into play. 2020 was kind of split for me, because we talked about Lil Baby just as much as we talked about DaBaby. They both really just shined during the pandemic era. More so Lil Baby a little bit before, but more so DaBaby during the pandemic. So they were talked about as much to me, and although their projects didn't really shine as much as I would think they would, their presence was definitely there. So you definitely heard one of the two all the time, if not both. 2021, we go back to Drake by default, because there's literally nothing else going on. And even though Lil Baby and Durk would drop their joint album, it still wasn't enough to beat, I'd say, Drake's Certified Lover Boy, which was really pushed and really presented as the big thing and sold the most records. It was that record. It was that big. Whether you liked the album or not, or thought it was a bit confusing and all over the place, it was still the top commodity at that time. So Drake got 2021 by default post-pandemic. 2022 again split between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, because it really kind of depended on which spectrum you were going for. Although Drake had more of the presence and more of the talk of the town vibes, Kendrick had the more dominant project to where he didn't have to do as much as a Drake would. So Drake would drop Her Loss with 21 Savage that year, a joint album that was supposed to be a male version of TLC's Scrubs. That's what Drake said. I don't know. That's what Drake said. That's what it was supposed to be. And Kendrick Lamar dropped Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, which was a very dominant album that to this day probably still has to be broken down, because it does have a bunch of singles, but they were all very deeply woven in a very convoluted web of lyrics. You really have to listen to it. Other than that, It's a really good album, and it's more on the serious side and on the deep side, as opposed to the opposite spectrum where Drake and 21 Savage basically just made songs for fun. So it depends on which way you want to go with it. It can belong to both of them for that year, because Kendrick had the best album that year, but Drake had the best singles. I don't know, the best presence that year. It really wasn't nothing else going on with nobody else at the time either. I mean, they were dropping, but it was nowhere near the level of Drake and Kendrick. So by default, Drake and Kendrick. Again, 2023, man, Drake took over For All the Dogs. That album was the one that really took over everything because everybody was highly anticipating it. Even though it ended up being a huge flop, everybody was waiting for it. You even had online blogs lying, saying it's going to drop on this date just to get more people to view their page. And even though that's not the only release, and there's several other great albums like Scarlet by Doja Cat, and A Gift and a Curse by Gunna, and Michael by Killer Mike, which to me was the best album of the year, period. They didn't have as much presence and boast as much popularity as a Drake would for All the Dogs. So even with that, Drake took over everything with that album. The album had a song with J. Cole. The album had a song with Yeet. The album had a song with his son. It was that album to where, numbers wise, again, it belonged to Drake. And now we're here in current day 2024, and you already know who's taking over, man. It's clear. It's not even close. He doesn't even need a project. It's Kendrick Lamar. I don't think I have to explain that part. The guy murdered the biggest rapper in the game, Drake, and now he's the number one guy. That's it. Wherever he goes, it's up. It's up. The number one song in the world is Not Like Us, a diss record. So you got everybody, kids and celebrities, saying, Drake, I heard you like him young. Don't you ever go to Cell Block 1? You know what I'm saying? And you go to see them, they fall in love, make sure you hide your little sister from them. They got celebrities and kids saying these things. Like, this is the number one song in the country. So yeah, it's there. So there's nobody even close to that right now. So yeah, that's it. And that was the last 20. I'm sorry, my mind got stuck. Like, I really did get frozen for a minute. But that was the last 20 years of the best rappers each year. I hope you liked the video. I hope you subscribed already while we were talking and while we were watching the video. And I hope you like the button, hit the like button, subscribe. Leave me alone, I'm tired. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate y'all. I'll see you on the next video. And remember, be peaceful and be still. Love y'all. I'm out.